One APIA Nevada is a grassroots nonprofit organization that advocates for policies empowering everyday Asian Pacific Islander Nevadans. Nevada is home to a growing APIA community, accounting for 1 in 10 voters. We are One APIA Nevada. Tonight's episode of Out in Front is brought to you by our season sponsors, Nevada State Education Association, One APIA Nevada, Silver State Voices, and Stefan and Marta Schmidt.
In the legislative building, and so we want to make sure that everyone can see what we're doing and everybody can make sure that we're here. There we go. All right, so welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. It's the pleasures of doing Out in Front in the wild, literally in front of the building. So tonight we're joined by Senator Rochelle Wynn. She's going to be talking about her amazing psilocybin bill that Brian on our team was so excited to testify on this week. We also have the fabulous Paula Luna, who spent the entire week up here in Carson City with me. She's going to be talking about the HOPE Act and some of the critical bills that we've been working on this week. And then we have our fabulous coalition partner, Eric Jang. He is the acting executive director of One APIA, and he is going to be talking to us about some of the voting.
We have a lot of opportunity to bring different bills and bring different policies forward in this building and pass great laws and prevent other laws from being enacted that are not so great. And Senate Bill 242, my bill regarding psilocybin, is probably one of my favorite bills that I'm bringing this session. It came to me just very organically, and strangely enough, I was giving away my kids' Legos on a neighborhood Facebook page. And the person that came to my door was Dr. Shaylee Jane. She is a psychiatrist in Las Vegas, lives a couple streets away from me, and practices right in Senate District 3. So we were talking about, what we do. I was telling her about what I do. She asked about my legislative, that makes way for real use of these products to allow people to heal themselves. I think we heard from Assemblyman Max Carter, who also became familiar with Dr. Jane as well and personally, and he couldn't have said it better. It was a very inspiring, hope-inspiring hearing that took place in Senate Health and Human Services on Senate Bill 242, hearing people's stories, hearing about how life-changing this was for people, just motivated me to, continue on this journey, and hopefully we can see this passed into law.
So, Assemblywoman, talk to us about why anxiety, all of these different mental illnesses that could be treated, potentially for good by just a few doses of these medicines. So talk to me about why it's so important to move in this direction.
I think we saw it with cannabis. I think about where we were like less than 10 years ago in the world of cannabis. We didn't have research. We didn't have any studies. We didn't have anything, but everything moved very quickly. And I see this moving quickly, if not more so. And the initial results that we're seeing and the initial research that we're seeing coming out of Johns Hopkins here in the United States and some other places outside of the United States, in combination with just the anecdotal evidence that we've seen talking with people that are growing this, and using this and treating themselves, is just so positive. And so part of my thinking was we need to be on the forefront of this. We need to allow our research institutions, we need to let our higher education professionals that are trained in this area to be able to study this and do this locally. And so that was a really important part of looking at this is we shouldn't be counting on like John Hopkins to do this. We have perfectly wonderful researchers here with Dr. Hines and Dr. Hines down at UNLV in the neuroscience department that know and have begun this research. And so we should be able to do this more thoroughly here within our own state. And that research should be coming from and directing our policy here. So I'm really excited on that front, on the research end. If you've watched any of those documentaries, if you've read the Michael Pollan book, if you start talking about this, the most fascinating thing about this is the more I talk about it, the more people are like, oh, this changed my life. How can I help you? What can I do to like get there? What can I do in this space? You realize that people, we're normalizing the conversation. It's not the psychedelics of the 60s and people tripping out at EDC or like any of these kind of things. I mean, I'm sure people are doing that, but I mean, this is a treatment that is being used with stroke patients. It's being used with PTSD, with alcohol and drug addiction, and depressive disorders and anxiety. And just where the research is going and that we can be a part of that is what, started that conversation. As far as why it's taken so long to deschedule MDMA or psilocybin, I mean, we still haven't descheduled like federally cannabis. So I'm not that surprised, but I've seen legislation already being proposed, bipartisan legislation in Congress. It's kind of stalling as things do in Congress. And so I think that's why it's important to bring it to the states. We get stuff done faster here. We have policies that are moving faster here. And the more people I talk to about this, the more people that I'm changing their mind. You talked about that, how to change your mind. People are hearing the stories. I was talking to Senator Ira Hansen, came over and he was like, I want to be a part of this. How can I be a part of this? So I think having those stories be told by people across the board, coming from different areas of our state, is telling that this is something that can really change people's lives.
So before I go to audience questions, and for those watching at home, definitely put your questions in the chat for the senator because we want to get to your questions. But how do we start to change not just the minds of those who sit in this legislative body, but the minds of those who maybe were a part of the war on drugs or were part of the kind of old thinking mentality of all drugs are bad, we need to criminalize it?
I think sometimes that's slowly, but I think it is like having people share their stories. I think connecting with other human beings is something that changes people's minds. I think you see it in your everyday relationships with people. I see it in this building every single day. When people come, you had talked about how Brian had come and testified on this bill. Um, I think for committee members to hear those stories and to hear them from a diverse array of people, I think is really life changing. I think one of the things that I looked at, I mean, I'm a 45-year-old mom of two, I'm not like, I've never used mushrooms. I probably would not use them, but I see the benefit that they are potentially for. Understands that this is not a part of the problem. This is a solution for like mental health treatment. And so, I think gaining that bipartisan support has been like one of the things that has, this wasn't something that just landed on a desk and no one heard this bill.
Okay, let's get to some questions from the audience so we can get you back to committee. The first question is, does SB 242 allow new research or will it actually decriminalize psilocybin for general use? So how does this bill work?
The first section of the bill does, with the amendments that we're proposing, it does allow for research. It allows for research institutions to like possess and have these, substances and medications to be able to study are the same as 28 grams of fentanyl or cocaine or methamphetamine or heroin. And I don't know how any reasonable person can, argue that those two things are the same. And so I think it's time for us to look at some of those numbers, look at how we've grouped different drugs, either illicit or medicinal, in the same category. And this bill attempts to address that as well.
The next question is, do you see psilocybin being regulated for recreational use like cannabis ever?
I don't know. I think if you look around the country, we look at Oregon, we look at Colorado, they've really moved in to treating it more as a medicinal one. I do believe in talking to people that use this, that having a guided experience is a much more therapeutic use of these medicines. So I would like to see that personally.
Oh, the senator is frozen on.
My
Oh,
my
there we go.
Oh, am I still frozen? I see this
You're
as a
good.
policy of like a mental health.
Yeah, and that's actually what leads into the next question. I think this is a really great question. I feel like mental health is being talked about and addressed like never before, especially this session, especially after the pandemic. I think more people are thinking about mental health. Do you feel like this is the best time to pass a bill like this? And because the viewer does think that.
I think so. That's why I'm bringing it. But we talk about mental health shortages. We talk about mental health individuals that are resistant to like traditional like medicines that are out there. I know from watching my mother, who's bipolar, go through like many types of like medications, during my adult lifetime, where I was able to like witness, her health like journey. That this is something that we should have in our toolbox of options. We were talking about telehealth, we're talking about other aspects of how we can expand mental health services, and this is just another one of those tools in that box.
I couldn't agree more. All right, last question on this topic, and then I just want to ask you about the other bills that you have this session because I know you're doing a lot of good stuff. Shelby asked, do you think the governor will support this bill if it hits his desk? And I hope he does, but what do you think at this point?
I think I'm trying to gather a lot of bipartisan support. The fact that I've had Republicans reach out to me and say that they're interested, I think there are some things that give them pause, especially on the decriminalization pieces, or the lowering of the criminal penalties, or distinguishing in that. I think gives people pause, but I think the more stories that they have, and the community in support of SB 242 has been fantastic. They are making calls, they are telling their stories. And I know that it's not easy for people to share their mental health struggles, like in a public forum, let alone in a testimony in a hearing. And it like brings me to tears that people would like be so passionate about this that they're willing to share like some of the most intimate things that are happening in their lives. But they are doing that with the senators in my house. They are doing that with the assembly members in the other house. And so I think continuing that momentum for people to like hear the voices of their constituents. And I can tell you, it even within this building, there are so many people that have like wanted to or have utilized this, and they're scared to like come out and talk about it, but they privately said, this has changed my life, and I hope it can change other people's lives. So I support you on that. Let me know what I can do. And there's lots of different ways people can support. Sometimes they support it privately. Sometimes they can are feel comfortable supporting it publicly. Sometimes they will write a letter. Sometimes they will send a text message. So I think there's lots of different ways that people can be moved. Sometimes they can share.
Anxiety, because I'd much rather do this than be on a pill the rest of my life, which I will do if I have to do. But I think this is just such an exciting new opportunity for people like me who have struggled with this their entire lives, and it might open new possibilities, which would be amazing. All right, Senator. So, last question for you. It was a deadline this week. Obviously, it was a huge deadline this week to get bills introduced. What bills do you have other than the psilocybin bill that you're working on? Or what are some of the cool, I know you have brew pubs and some of the other cool bills this session. So, what else are you working on?
Feel like I have a lot of vices. I do. I'm like, someone was like, you have a mushroom bill, you have a cannabis bill, you have a beer bill. Like, do you have anything else? I'm like, well, I look at my brew pub bill. It is very much a family business. It's not Anheuser-Busch. It's not like they're not going to take down all the these people overnight, but they're creating a product and they're having a difficult time expanding. So I'm really excited about that bill. It turns out to be a lot harder to do than I thought it was going to be. Who knew moving beer from the place you make it to the place you sell it is going to be difficult? But that's one of them. I've also looked at some of the inequities that took place that are taking place within our cannabis industry. It's new with the Cannabis Compliance Board, and I think I was a part in one of the things that I hope I have a reputation for is if we're working on something and we vote on something and it turns out that it's not working like we think it should work, it is our responsibility to come back and change it. And so I think of the direction that we gave the Cannabis Compliance Board. We were doing what we thought was best at the time, but I think there are things that we can do to fix and change that. I have in the same vein, during the last legislative session, I was fortunate enough to carry and sponsor a bill that decriminalized minor traffic tickets. So there's still cleanup on that. There are things that we didn't think about in this building. We call them unintended consequences and cleanup bills. So I imagine my entire career will be spent cleaning up that Assembly Bill 116, but that's fine because every time I do, I'm like, okay, we can make this better. We can make this more efficient. We can make this fair. We can make this process in our state better. So I'm working on that. I have one around catalytic converters, another one brought to me in my neighborhood. People were stealing catalytic converters everywhere because no one has garages in my district, and including myself. And so it was something that was really impactful. And I looked at it, and I'm a criminal defense attorney. I'm not one to want to bring crimes and bring new things, but I noticed I never saw a catalytic converter theft charge ever in my I'm not 21 years. I'm like, I haven't seen it, but I know that there's 1,000% increase in these. So what is happening? So I have been working with our enforcement partners, nonprofit organizations that have been really hit really hard on these kind of that. Really anyone with a parking lot. So that, and then I had a healthcare worker protection bill that I recently presented. Um, you know, your organization knows, being on the front line, some of the backlash that our healthcare workers were seeing, during the pandemic. And some of those unfortunately have continued. And so a lot of our frontline workers, not just our doctors and nurses and traditional hospital staff, were being targeted and battered because of their position in hospitals. But what's the bill? It is Senate Bill 289 hopes to do is to include technicians, students that are working in the hospital, emergency medical, students that are in the hospital because they're in the healthcare and they're being attacked. And just because they don't have an MD behind their name or an RN behind their name, they should be availed those same protections. So just some equity things that are, some of them are a response to the lack of laws or the lack of enforcement. So I'm really excited about this session though.
I am too. Thank you. I think we've supported almost every single one of your bills. So, just the last question for you, what is the vibe this session? We just passed the first deadline. We have another major deadline looming. What do you feel like is going to get done this session? And how do you think we interact with the governor as we move bills through both chambers and then things start moving over to the governor's desk? What do you hope to see?
I think it'll be different. I think it's a transition. I think it's a transition for everyone. I'm not going to say that I didn't change more than half of my bills, and what, I was hoping to accomplish depending on what the makeup of the legislative and the executive branch looked like. But I think there's still a pathway. I think, I always think about this. I think it was 87% of our bills last session were bipartisan. So I think you will still see some of that. You may not see the big movement that you want to see. And we're fortunate that we did pass a lot of progressive things previously. So I think it will be holding on to some of those things where we have unprecedented amounts of money right now. And I think that is potentially good. And we can, we passed something out of work session just today that was incredibly monumental for our state workers. And the fact that some of these provisions hadn't been changed since this like 1979, I think that's what I heard at one point. We're still able to accomplish things. And those are, executive agency, executive branch, like state workers. So I think there will be bipartisan support in a lot of those things. I think we'll have it'll be a traditional session, where maybe we're not fighting within parties, but we're fighting amongst each other. But I'm still hopeful, but maybe I'm just an optimist.
Listen, at least somebody in this building's still an optimist. I'm not. My spirit's officially been broken this week. So, Senator, I want to say thank you to you for all your work. Thank you for joining us. I know you got to get back to committee, but you're welcome anytime on the show. We'll be doing it a bunch more as we get closer to the end. So thank you for everything you're doing.
No problem. Take care. And again, please encourage everyone that's watching to like reach out and have their voice heard. I know I listen. I know my colleagues do too. And even on some of these progressive issues, sometimes it's important to remind even your progressive friends and allies, that you're supportive of certain things, especially like things that, people get nervous about, like mushrooms, especially if they haven't watched a documentary, if they don't know someone that has. So I always tell people to share, 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 share. And I'm grateful that someone like Assemblyman Max Carter, who, when you look at him, once you get to know him, it like makes 100% sense. But for him to like tell that story, I think is very impactful because he's not the traditional face of someone who you think has like mental health issues, not someone who struggles, and someone who has looked at like, I guess non-traditional like types of treatment. So it's good for people to see the various faces of these issues. But so thank you so much, and thank you for everything you guys do here in the building as well.
And before you go, how do people get in touch with you? I guess we should tell them that.
Well, you can go to my website. It's Rochelle for Nevada, everything spelled out.com. I can tell you my cell number is right on there. So you can text me, you can call me. I think that's the greatest thing I love about having a citizen legislature is we're fairly, accessible. I know it's a little busy during session. You can also go on Nellis and, make appointments with, our assistants while we have staff for this limited time period. And you can always email, text, social media, DM, any of those things. I try to check them, maybe not as regularly as I would hope because I am 45 and I'm not my 13-year-old now. But I still have great people that are helping and volunteering and wanting to do everything they can on some of these bills because they really are impactful. So, but thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Have a great evening. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Take care.
All right.
Bye.
Now I want to bring in Eric Jang. Eric, join me. Welcome. Come in. Eric, introduce yourself to the people and let folks know who you are and what you do.
Right. Hello, everyone. My name is Eric Jang with One API in Nevada. API is short for Asian Pacific Islander Americans. It is an organizing term. It is a political term to make sure that we have strength in numbers, and we have been advocating and organizing the fast-growing Asian Pacific Islander communities here in our state, which is about 12.5% of our population, and 392,000 people. And it doesn't cut me off. I'll keep going with Filipinos, 44%, followed by Chinese, followed by Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander, Korean Vietnamese, South Asian Indian. I can go on forever.
I
It's
love
a very
it.
diverse state.
No, it's great. So you were helping to author the language access bill this week. That was heard in legislative operations and elections this week. Talk to us about why language access is so important when it comes to election-related materials, voting rights, all of the things that we hold near and dear to our hearts, and making sure that people have the right and ability to vote.
Yeah, because in the bottom of it, everyone, regardless of their physical ability, their language ability, if they are a United States citizen, our Constitution guarantees them voting rights, not voting privilege, to have equal access to the polls. So for us, of course, there's a lot of argument every citizen, naturalized citizen, have to pass through English tests and citizenship tests, and that's not the case because there's language waiver, there's people based on different ability, but they are United States citizens. And Voting Rights Act enacted in 1965. There's a Section 203 guarantee that if there's significant need for language barrier, that state and counties are required to provide that language access when it comes to the polls.
Awesome. So talk to us about what the bill number is, what exactly it does, and how it's all going to work.
Awesome. So thank you again for the opportunity.
Yeah, of course.
For us, it's Assembly Bill 246. And for us too, it is to make sure that the federal requirement currently states that for any state, if a language minority, say Spanish or Tagalog for Filipinos, for Chinese, reach to 10,000 people that the Census Bureau deemed through American Community Survey, they have a model on how many voting age citizens, so 18 plus how many people that we believe naturalized in the state are limited English proficient. So the threshold is 10,000. So for Clark County, Spanish is at 80,000, 81,000. So I think we have Spanish on our ballot since the early 2000s. Tagalog is the next one. It reached the 10,000 threshold in 2010, so 2011 when the census released. So I think 2014 was the first time we had Tagalog on our ballot in Clark County. So now the last ACS, the last census that was released about a year and a half ago in 2021. So Chinese in their algorithm, this is not a real number. This is a best guess from our census with all the statisticians, is 444, 9566. So 434 people short. And this is like, they tweaked the variable. So we don't know if that really is 300 and 434 people short. It could be a lot more. So we know that we miss it as the near miss for Chinese. That means we won't get another determination until 2026, and that means we won't possibly get Chinese on the ballot by 2028. So that means by the spirit of the federal law, we should have already had that. But the same thing with Spanish in Washoe County. I know currently Washoe County does provide that, but we want to make sure that resources is mandated in the state with the resources and can push to statewide Spanish ballot. So for Spanish, the presumptive citizens of voting age with limited English proficient that speaks Spanish in Washoe County is about 8,000. So we know it will cross by the next time. So it will be 5 years from now. So anyway, long story short, this bill with Assemblywoman Torres, One AP in Nevada, with all voting is local, and also with the coalition, with everyone that has been participated, is to make sure that we start a framework that we're able to add in more and more languages, including Shoshone as an audio, including Korean Vietnamese in the future, including Spanish in more and more counties and localities. So I think it's a great step forward for us to provide that language access, but it's also making sure that we have toll-free support for hotline, and then also making sure there's a language advisory committee within Secretary of State's office to see all the different ways we can push this forward.
So I think this is a really great question from the audience, and I want to remind people at home, if you have questions for Eric, now's a great time to ask. Last election, ACDC, which is the 501c3. Oh, look at his sticker. He's got an Abiquame sticker on his water bottle, everybody. Thank you for representing our other project. So in the last election, ACDC, which is the 501c3 kind of sister organization to the one we're talking about tonight, you created a Chinese voter guide. All language, it was translated. You translated the entire ballot. It was an incredible feat, so much work. You talked about it in the bill hearing this week. If the language access bill passes, does that responsibility then shift to the county or the state? And what role would your organizations likely play at that point?
So for us too, I think we're very lucky. We got a grant with national local partners, with All Voting is Local, and also with Northern Nevada, the International Center that has a language bank. And of course, for us, I have to do the copy editing. Also, not to my own horn, but went through public education in Taiwan. So Mandarin Chinese is my first language, and went through political science as my major. So that is actually getting to use my first language to prove the voting languages and materials. So I think that's why the county and SOS understand the seriousness we have to take. It's not like you go into ChatGPT or Google Translate, or anyone can just translate that. This will be a government document to make sure that everything is correct. And I know for Battle Moon Progress or an IPN, there is significantly push on combating dis and misinformation. So for us, being able to provide that language access is an accurate way to provide kind of the vaccine towards a lot of the malicious way of separating some of the communities out by bad information. So having the government being able to provide that, having the official languages, that us as a trusted messenger is being now, instead of having to do all the back end work, now we can do front end of telling our community the great resources now that we have and help promote it and help highlight the work from our election workers.
So remind folks that bill number again. And if you want to go online, we'll put the link for Nellis in the chat. So this way you can go online and vote in favor of this bill. Tell folks how to do that, what the bill number is, and how to support this bill as it moves through the legislature.
Yep. So it's Assembly Bill 246. Go to Nellis. There's ways to submit opinion for support and support and against. Fun fact for last cycle and this cycle, wild horses is always number one with popularity. But look up AB 246, just all the odd numbers. You'll be able to find it. And then I think there's also different initiatives, different bills this session on language access, not just on the ballot, but also for health equity.
That's weird because I usually have the least favorite bills. So that's weird. Anyways, go on and vote for the gun bills, everyone. Lots of good stuff to vote on. Anyways, so let's talk about assemblyman, not to be confused with senator now. Used to be assemblywoman. Assemblyman Wynn, I'm getting myself confused now. Prescription drug bill. Y'all have been supporting that. That is your sometimes boss. Talk to us about why that bill is so important, especially for, again, language access and making sure that prescription drugs are understood in a native language.
So I think this is something Assemblyman Yui Wen now represent Assembly District 8, the highest district with highest percentage of Asian Pacific Islander voters. And for him too, as I work for him in our 501c3 ACDC, is we do have a lot of health equity push. That means we go into the community based on our lived experiences as impacted families that we as immigrants, no matter where your country of origin, have to translate for your elders, for your parents, for your family members, sometimes even just strangers, because you have the language skill. And we know that there's a significant amount of people with limited English access for the prescription. When they need to take it, it's very easy to have errors or confusion. You're trying to Google this, you're trying to scan and making sure. So Assemblyman Wen has a bill, this is Assembly Bill 251 on making sure that the state can provide languages in the most spoken languages outside of English here in Nevada. So this is making sure that when you go to a pharmacist, you can request that language and will be bilingual. So the pharmacist and your provider or caretaker can still have the English language, but you can also require anywhere from Spanish all the way to, I have this list, from Spanish, Tagalog, Chinese, Korean, Vietnamese, Arabic, French, German, and Russian, which is the top 10 languages spoken outside of English here in our great state.
All right, so that's another great bill that folks can support. Before I let you go and I go to Paula to talk about the HOPE Act, which I know you all support as well, talk to me about, there was just a deadline. We were talking about that with the senator just a few minutes ago. Monday was the deadline that had gotten moved back. There's another deadline for committee passage on April 14th, which means that if those bills that are not exempted are not out of committee, they all die.
Yep.
So what bills are you all really paying attention to, and what are some of your priorities this session to make sure get through that deadline?
So for us, I think I try to think of them in buckets. And currently can't name the specific bill numbers, but we think about health equity, we think about education equity, we think about language access, we think about all this immigrant justice ways that we can make our states better. And I think there's especially the ones that they're all great intent.
Mhm.
A lot of time is to make sure that it's fiscally responsible and it's doable, it's operational. So in addition to Assembly Bill 246 and then Assembly Bill 251, we're also tracking a number of other bills. I think a significant one that's coming up next week will be student loan borrower bill of rights.
Yes, I'm so
That
excited
one
about
with
that one.
Assemblywoman Peters. I
Yep.
think those are something that we're working with our high school students. I know from Assemblyman Wen, from Assemblywoman Mosca, from Assemblywoman Gonzalez, there is a lot of bill that improve work-based learning, making sure our high school students have the work experience and just removing barriers so small businesses and nonprofits can participate in those work-based programs and really provide that pipeline for talent and making sure, I don't want to say pipeline for talent, that sounds like a corporate talking point, but also making sure we're equipping people to have the great job that they pursue and have. So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Much.
thank you, Eric. How do people get in touch with you if they want to get involved with your bills and the good work that you all are doing this session?
So I think my Twitter handle is being out there. That's my middle name, Lester. I don't know why my mother, as an immigrant, would name me Lester.
Why not?
Lester J. But then
Just a good joke.
my email is eric at spelling out oneapinevada.org as nonprofit, so .org. So yeah, the Eric at oneapinevada.org.
All right.
Thank
We'll
very
have you
much.
back as things move through session. Thank you, Eric, for all your
Thank you.
support. All right, I want to bring Miss Paula in. She is our operations manager here at Battle Worm Progress. Paula's been spending this week up in Carson with me. She just went home this morning. She's coming back up on Saturday for Grassroots Lobby Day. Paula, we have so much important stuff up next week. So many important bills up next week. So many huge things that are going to get scheduled last minute. Talk to me about what this week was like, kind of the vibe in the building and how things are going to look next week, because it's going to be chaos and we're going to need people involved.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So a lot of movement this week, especially because Monday, like you mentioned, was the first important deadline where we had to get the legislators were getting all their bills in. But we also we have our big grassroots lobby days next week, but a few of our partner orgs had their lobby days this week as well. So there was a lot of people in the building, a lot of energy in the building because we were hearing so many things and supporting so many of our partners and so many of the bills that we wanted to support. So it was high energy, fast moving, a little draining, but worth it. It was a good time.
Paula, what'd you learn this week, just out of curiosity?
Oh my gosh, I learned so much. What do I want to share though? Well, I tell Annette this all the time that I'm up there because I've had the privilege of going up a few times now, that there's nothing like being in the building. There's an advantage to being in the building, and even just like the energy and like the interacting with everyone and everything is it keeps you going. Before you know it, it's the end of the day and you've done so much,
Will wants to know if you had any cool experiences helping volunteers lobby their legislators. I know we will next week, but what about this week? Or I know Brian got to go lobby Republicans with me, so talk to me about those things.
Yeah, so I was a little jealous that Brian got to go lobby Republicans because I was very curious how those were going to be. But he filled me in on the details, so it seemed like they were all positive meetings, which is good. We had Latino Lobby Day this week, the week that I was up yesterday. So that was cool. I'm a Latina, so seeing other Latinos up and seeing the Latino representatives like engaging with their constituents and all the legislators engaging with their Latino constituents was exciting. We had a lot of amazing bills that really impact communities like ours. I know we're going to get into it right now, but those were all cool experiences.
All right, so let's talk about the HOPE Act. Tell us the bill number. You got to be in the room while the testimony was happening this week. Tell us what the HOPE Act does and why it's so important. And big shout out to Senator Doñate. He's the sponsor of this bill. So talk to us about kind of like the vibe in the room too.
Yeah, lots of support for the HOPE Act, which was amazing. A lot of people showed up. But pretty much the HOPE Act, there's like it's multifaceted, but there's two key points for me. The first one is that it expands coverage to everyone. So anybody who would qualify for Medicare, but regardless of the aspect of citizenship, so removing that aspect would qualify. So that's huge for not just people who are undocumented, but we know that people are this impacts like entire communities, right? Because if you know someone, and it's very high in like the Latino community, the Asian American community, that you're going to know someone who's undocumented. If they're in your family, if they're not getting health coverage, that affects you, that affects them, that affects you. But also, like on a greater scale, preventative care is so important in our communities, no matter who you are, because we're all in this space together.
One of the things that shocked me, and I guess didn't shock me because it makes sense, but the hospitals were particularly supportive of this. Many doctors and healthcare providers were particularly supportive of the HOPE Act because a lot of people who might be undocumented, who don't have access to insurance, therefore don't have access to medical coverage, use our ER facilities, our hospitals for their healthcare. So them having access to Medicaid is super important because it'll allow them to actually get paid for those services. Talk to us about some of the testimony and some of the people who went up to the table in support of the bill when you were in the hearing.
Yeah, I mean, we all know no one is going to get turned down in the emergency room, and no one should get turned down in the emergency room, right? But those doctors and those hospitals are still providing that service, and it ends up impacting families. I mean, I think the most heartbreaking, one of the most heartbreaking stories that we heard was shared by his name is escaping me, but his brother was sick, and not only was he dealing with his brother passing from his illness, but then the medical bills ended up causing them to lose their family home. So how, just could you imagine, like, just heartbreak after heartbreak? And this is exactly what the bill would address, right? Because you're covering people who are uninsured, and you're preventing further financial disasters in these families. But again, going back to the fact that, like, if you can provide these people with preventative care in the first place, that person maybe could have caught on earlier that they were sick and not died.
Yeah, so what is the bill number and how do folks support it and where is it at right now?
So the bill number is SB 419, and it just got heard in the Health and Human Services Committee. So it is headed over to the
It'll be work sessioned.
It will be work sessioned, and it's not the monies committee, right? It's like the
it might have to go there, but first it has to be work sessioned out of the committee that it's currently in, which is Health and Human Services on the Senate side. I'm making everybody learn this, friends.
So much exciting things, and every bill takes its own unique little course. It's so exciting.
Especially when you're tracking like 200 of them. Yeah. So we have a great question in the chat, and I think this is important now that you've experienced your first one, but you're also planning to bring volunteers up here with us next week. You're in charge. I just go here now. And by the way, if you're nervous, stop it because you're doing great. What recommendations do you have for people coming up next week for Grassroots Lobby Days or Equality Days or any of the other great lobby days we have coming up in the future? What, just based on your experience this week, what advice do you have for them?
Wear layers because it is snowing, and then you're hot. It gets hot in the building, and then you go out to lunch and it's raining, or it'll be warm enough, but then you go back into the building and come back later in the day and it's freezing again. So wear layers. And like our organization, we're always taking care of each other. So like bring snacks. We had snacks, right? Make sure you eat, drink water. But also you do all those things so that you can pay attention to what's going on in the building, because again, things move fast.
I think one of my biggest recommendations is lean in, right? Do as much as humanly possible. Go to all the hearings, go to as many meetings as possible, talk to as many legislators as possible, sit on the floor, like do all the things so that you get the full experience. And I know you got to do some of that this week too. So, what was it like for you? I know you were up here with me during redistricting, but you were also up here with me for the first day versus like an actual real legislative session day. What was the difference for you, Paula?
The first day was definitely more like a slower pace, right? Everybody was just getting started, but it is more like ceremonial, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word, but like, everybody gets sworn in and you see people, on the floor for the first time. And I, like a lot of people on our team, study political science and I love policy, like, and I'm a nerd about it. I'm a nerd about like procedure and stuff. So I loved it. But I love where we're at now. We're halfway through the session and things are really moving and policy is actually being made now. So that's equally exciting, but a lot faster pace.
All right, Shelby wants to know, what was the best thing I taught you while you have been at the legislature so far?
Oh my gosh. A lot. I think something that I learned, I'm learning a lot it's just my first legislative session, but this is something that you are always teaching me even outside, is just to like jump on and do it. Because like here I am on OIF, just in here mixing it up with our partner and a senator, So yeah, those lessons carry over even in the legislature. Just get up there and make it happen. Today, this week, I was just kind of hanging out with Maria Teresa, our deputy director, and she was going to testify, and then she got called into a meeting, and then I got my first like, okay, you're going to testify, write something up in like a second because you're about to go up. So that was exciting and that was a good lesson. But it was another one of those things like, okay, it's going to be you now, go.
For those who are wondering why that happened, we were triple booked for something and I couldn't get to all the meetings at once. So luckily I had people here with me, and she can trust her gut and she did a great job. So I was very proud of her. All right, Ms. Paula, well, thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you to all of you watching at home. We'll put the Nellis link in the chat again. It is Grassroots Lobby Days next week. We are going to need you to testify on lots of bills. So look for Maria's updates that will come on Monday morning. We're going to have a ton of hearings next week. We might send a couple of updates, email updates next week, because there's a ton of hearings coming up. And there are going to be a ton of hearings for the next 2 weeks while we get through this next bill deadline. And we're going to need all of you to either call in, go to the Grant Sawyer building, come up here to Carson City with us and make your voices heard. There are a lot of important bills already scheduled for Monday. There are a lot of important bills. We're going to be here tomorrow in the building. There are a lot of important bills up tomorrow. So take a look at the calendar on Nellis. We'll put that link in the chat and make sure you know the bills that are coming up. I just wanted to say one other thing. Happy Indictment Day, everybody. It is such a treat. Such a treat. I've been waiting for this moment for quite some time, many years. And so I may or may not have posted on my Facebook, but or emails. So anyways, so happy Indictment Day, everybody. I hope you all enjoy watching the news over the next week and the complete meltdown that's going to come with it. So this has been an amazing evening tonight with Senator Wynn. We also had Eric and we have Miss Paula, and we are going to be back out in front with you on Thursday next week for Out in Front. We will be live at 5 from the legislative building, and next week we're going to have the other half of our team up here, and they're going to be on, and we're going to give you a live legislative update because we're going to be square in the middle of this deadline season, and we are going to have a lot of bills that we're going to need to tell you about. So get ready. It's going to be Billapalooza next week, and that's what we're going to be calling it. So live at 5 next week on Facebook, Twitter, and all of our channels. We'll see you then. Thanks, everyone.